Welcome back to The Explainer. I am so excited to get into this one today because we're zooming in exclusively on a really critical, honestly fascinating part of our banking analysis checklist. We're jumping straight into Step 5, Decomposing Profit. If you want to understand exactly how the pros look at banks, and more importantly, how they avoid being fooled by flashy headline numbers, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's get right to it.
Okay, so let's dive right into this. Picture this scenario. You open up the financial news, and a bank's headline is just screaming that their net profit has jumped massively. The stock is rallying hard. Do you immediately start celebrating? Or is that shiny, massive number potentially just a mirage? Well, to answer that, we have to look at what our source materials states. And it says this, literally with zero exaggeration, this is the single most important analytical move in reading a bank. Treating this specific step like a forensic accountant, really getting into the weeds, is exactly what separates the seasoned pros from the amateurs. You simply cannot just take that headline profit at face value. No way.
Now, what's really interesting here is that the source explicitly warns us not to pop the champagne just yet. When profit jumps, your immediate, totally reflexive question has to be, okay, but where exactly did that growth come from? We literally have to pull it apart. We have to decompose the profit to find the actual truth.
And this brilliantly illustrates the point, using a hypothetical scenario right from the text. Imagine a tiny, almost negligible 3% growth in core, pre-provision profit. Just 3%. But then, right next to it, there's a massive 20% surge in net profit. I mean, that is a glaring disconnect, right?
So I gotta challenge you here. Where on earth did that extra profit come from? How do you mathematically end up with a 17-point gap between the fundamental operating growth and that final bottom line that everyone is cheering about? To solve that mystery, we have to isolate the P-POP. That's the pre-provision operating profit. As you know, this is the core earnings engine of the business, completely isolated from any bad loan buffers. It tells us the actual, unvarnished operational strength of the bank, the real deal. And then, of course, we have the net profit. That's the flashy headline figure calculated after those provisions are actually deducted. So the entire gap between that core operational engine we just talked about and this final net profit is dictated entirely by how the bank manages those bad loan buffers. So the crucial point is this. If that pre-provision profit grew by only 3%, but the net profit skyrocketed by 20%, well, the underlying business didn't magically improve. The bank didn't suddenly just get way better at lending. The illusion is simply that provisions went down. The bank just had to set aside less money for bad loans this quarter compared to the last one. That's it. But here is the stark, really unignorable warning from our text. Relying on falling provisions for profit growth is a total illusion, because that tailwind eventually hits a hard floor. You can only lower provisions so much, right? Once those provisions approach zero, that mathematical boost completely vanishes. So that massive profit growth, it cannot repeat. It's mathematically impossible. Which brings us to the core thesis of this whole explainer. When we decompose a bank's profit, we're really looking at a tale of two opposing forces. On one hand, we've got core-driven growth, and on the other, we have provision-driven growth. Being able to dissect the difference between these two, that's how you actually read a bank's true health. So core-driven growth comes directly from net interest income and genuine operating strength. Because it stems from the actual everyday business of lending money and earning a spread, this is high-quality, repeatable growth. It's a solid, reliable run rate. It's exactly what you want to see. Contrast that with provision-driven growth, because this relies solely on the mathematical tailwind of reducing bad loan buffers rather than any actual underlying business strength. Our text explicitly labels it as low quality. And like we said, because those provisions can't fall forever, it is strictly temporary, a flash in the pan. Let's move along and see how this all builds into a practical application. To expose the true quality of a bank's profit, our source provides the exact metrics that a professional analyst pulls to do this decomposition themselves. All right, so here is your essential checklist of what to pull from the earnings report. First, you need the pre-provision operating profit and its growth rate. Got that? Then, grab the net profit and its growth rate. Next, you want to isolate the actual provisions figure itself. And finally, always keep an eye out for any one-off treasury or other income gains. Comparing these specific numbers is what actually separates the illusion from reality. Once you have those numbers in front of you, you apply the Ask Yourself framework from our source. Look closely at that headline profit jump and actively ask yourself, is this just a provision tailwind? And honestly, more importantly, has that temporary gust of wind now been completely exhausted? Because good analysts don't just stare at today's flattering headline, right? They project forward. You have to ask, okay, what is going to drive growth next year once that one-off tailwind is totally gone? Because if the core engine isn't growing, the bank's earnings are absolutely going to stall, no matter how amazing this particular quarter looked. So the ultimate output of step 5 in our banking checklist is exactly this: to successfully identify the reliable, repeatable core run rate of the bank and completely separate it from any one-off headline boosts. It's all about filtering out the accounting noise so you can see the true, undeniable operational momentum. Which brings us to a final, provocative thought from the source to leave you with today. Whenever you see a bank reporting a massive jump in earnings, empower yourself by asking, is this profit growth real and repeatable, or is it just a one-off? Approach every future banking headline with an analytical, skeptical eye. If you do that, you'll never fall for the profit illusion. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and we'll see you next time.